right, welcome another edition of the Awesemo MLB Deeper Dive. Eytan with you for the next hour, but more importantly, of course, the two gentlemen with me who will be breaking everything down on this 6-game slate tonight. We have 5 games in action right now, but we care about what's happening tonight. Even me with my Phillies, I'm willing to turn a little blind eye on it. Alex Awesemo's in the house. Gundacker's in the house. You know the crew. You know the drill. We have a busy next hour here from top stacks to pitchers as well. We'll go game by game through this 6-game slate. Gentlemen, Alex, Gundacker, let's look at the overall view, as far as how you look at tonight before we start looking game by game.
Yeah, excited for tonight's slate. I mean, it's going to be a really interesting one because we have a really, really good play with Cincinnati facing Chichi Gonzalez in Coors Field. The over-under of this game is the highest we've seen all season at 11.5. So there could be some fireworks in this one, and everyone else is going to think that it's going to happen too. So it'll be interesting to figure out what we should do here. Gundacker, how you doing, man?
No, I'm doing good. Yeah, usually these shorter slates that feature Coors, I look to try and justify faking Coors as much as possible, but I just can't. Like, I got to go there today. So I think getting a little bit more creative at pitching might be my approach. I've done a whole lot of research on Logan Gilbert to maybe see if that might be an option. So yeah, I think I'm gonna be a sucker for Coors on a short slate.
All right, well, as we jump into the first game, we always remind you here when we begin, you want to like, you want to subscribe, you want to stay up to date with not only what we're doing here as far as content, as far as shows on awesemo.com, but also any giveaways, any DFS tools, premium stuff that we'll tell you about this show as well that's available to you, especially in MLB for player rankings today. You want to make sure you're up to date on everything, so smash away, like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell so you never miss a thing. You mentioned being creative at pitching. So we open up this first game of the 2 earlier games tonight on this slate. Oakland is in Boston, and at least with one of these pitchers, you have a top 3 or 4 option when it comes to cost on Draftkings. So how do we approach knowing that there could be a higher priced or maybe even a better P1 out there? Is there anything that jumps out at least initially? And Alex, we can start with how you look at this pitching matchup.
Yeah, Sean Manaea versus Garrett Richards, 2 guys that when you think of them, you're thinking, these are pretty average guys. Sean Manaea this year has turned up the strikeouts a little bit to 26%, but that's just above league average. And then Garrett Richards, a little bit worse than average at 22%. So these aren't guys that will blow you away. And then we're looking at the park, Fenway. That's a big hitter's park. So honestly, like, these guys don't seem like very strong options to me today.
Yeah, Gundacker, I wonder if just the price on Manaea is too much. 8,800 on DraftKings for that one great outing he had, knowing, of course, it kind of fell at the end against the Rays, but maybe that's the expectation that he bounces back and has another one of these strong performances. I don't know if the cost is too much.
So on this slate with the pitching options we have, I'm gonna think a little less about price and more about who can get me over 20 DKP. There is a range of outcomes that Manaea gets there, but this would be one of the tougher matchups he's had. You look at that game log, last 3 games are against probably lower half teams and plus strikeouts. Really, I look at this game log, it's like Houston, the first 2 games, and every now and then Minnesota is a tough matchup, but he dominated them. So I would say there is at least a range of outcome where he could get me that 20 plus, but it absolutely will not be a priority. And the Red Sox can be one of the tougher matchups, at least strikeout wise, based on this projected lineup. I've got all but 3 guys at 21% or less K rate. So it's probably a below average matchup for him. So just because of his, over 12% swing and strike rate on a short slate, he'll make the pull, but he absolutely won't be somebody that I'm overly invested in, and I don't feel like I have to be too staked in them to feel like I'm leveraging the field. But also at the same time, like Red Sox catch a lefty, JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, might even catch Michael Chavis leading off. Like there's still going to be names in Fenway that I'm going to be targeting, and maybe a couple pivot spots here, like 5,300 on JD. A lot of that money, that 5K money, is going to end up in Coors. So JD against the lefty just might be a proper pivot.
Yeah, and I wonder with Richards if it's a similar situation where you got a lot of run support last time out, and maybe the expectation here is gets the win, but from a fantasy standpoint, it's not going to live. I don't know if those same metrics that you applied to more likely stay away from Minaya. If that's the case, I imagine it would be if not stronger with Richards.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the win a little bit more. They have a dead even implied run total. Richards is putting together a couple solid fantasy point games. You've seen that pitch count get close to 100. Kind of the same situation with Minaya. Like he hasn't had a strength of schedule that just blows you away. But that's not his fault. But 8,200, could he touch 20? Maybe a loose range of outcomes. I just think because of how short the slate is, both these guys might leak into the pool. But I can't foresee myself being like heavily invested. I would say I'm probably more likely to stack Red Sox than Athletics. Athletics do bolster a higher strikeout percentage than the Red Sox, considering the platoon today. And the Athletics offensively, they do have a little bit more, a little less pop than the Red Sox pre-flop. So I because of that, I might end up with more Richards, but I do think Minaya is the better pitcher when you're just looking at stuff.
Yeah, and I'm seeing here with Alex with the top stacks that we have available. Oakland clearly at the 4th spot, Boston a little bit lower. But is there anything that may even be appealing with Boston, knowing that Oakland is going to be up there as far as, at least for a stack percentage, a pretty good option?
Yeah, I think the nice thing about this game is on a normal slate, these would probably be the chalk stacks of the day. Being in Fenway with the good park facing average pitchers, and these are two really good teams too. So I do think you're going to get a lot lower ownership than an average day, and there's a lot of offensive potential in this game. The over/under is 9. That's higher than we've been seeing recently. The prices are a little bit tough to get to on these two teams, but I think if you're trying to figure out a way to fade Coors, this could be the ticket.
Yeah, that would probably be the biggest thing in the backdrop for tonight, right? Is just matching everything up with Coors from both a stack standpoint and even a fading of a pitcher, even if it's somebody deeper on a P2, I imagine. Like we just have that on the backdrop the whole night is basically factoring in Coors is how we're going to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that in particular, the game tonight is like a batter's like game here. So it is really garnering ridiculous amounts of ownership right now.
Okay. So if we just keep this theme kind of in the backdrop, knowing where we are, especially from a stack standpoint, let's look at the Yankees in Tampa. And it's going to be, again, we've seen this. I'm watching it now with the Phillies as far as unable to complete that sweep. I don't necessarily know how confident you may be that maybe this is not a letdown game for the Yankees and they do get that third game against the Rays. If not, then maybe it's something that factors in on staying away if it's tailing or just in general with the Yankees.
Yeah, so the Yankees, this one looks a little bit tougher as far as bats and maybe not that exciting for pitchers either. It's kind of a pitcher's park in Tampa, but both teams, I mean, the Yankees have a really strong lineup, so that that kind of is negated a little bit by the park. And then Tampa, just about an average lineup facing Taillon. So Taillon, he's been injured a lot, but so far this year is off to a strong start with 29% Ks. Hasn't been good at limiting runs, but he seems like one of the best options at pitchers today. 7,700
on DraftKings. Like that. That's your squad, Gundacker. backing him on the DFS angle too?
Well, I mean, so Yankees and Tropicana, that's like it's not a high scoring affair more often than it's not. Yesterday they just put up 1 run. It was good enough to get Garrett Cole and Aroldis Chapman the game prior, 3 runs. Let's say Judge had 3 hits yesterday. So it's another situation where like 5+ K on DJ LeMahieu, Stanton, almost 5K on Judge. Like that's core. You're sacrificing some Coors bats for that. Leverage wise and game theory wise, there's definitely a chip in a chair for Giancarlo Stanton against a lefty like a Rich Hill to put one over the wall. But it's usually not a spot I'm gonna stack. Pitching wise, though, I think you can make a case for both. As Alex said, Jameson Taillon, strikeout stuff is starting to develop a little bit more. His Sierra and xFIP is better than his ERA, so it looks like a little progression coming his way. I'll say Watson, his last start, there was a pair of defensive plays that really bailed him out of some tough spots, including a Superman catch by Clint Frazier. If that doesn't happen, Jameson Taillon maybe is not coming off a pair of good starts. But the Rays, this lineup they're throwing out against a righty, Randy Arozarena, Brandon Lau, Mike's. Actually, let me double check that they actually just confirmed that they have Kevin Smith instead of Zunino. They have a lot of strikeout potential. So maybe Taillon is 7-7 if I can knock on the door of the 20 DKP because of the park, because of the matchup. I probably have some of him. I mean, this is just really going to be a spray and pray type of night for me at pitcher, it seems like. And I'll have more Taillon than Rich Hill. Rich Hill is more of a contact pitcher with that curveball right now, 9% swing and strike rate. But he's still somebody that is going to keep the ball on the ground a little bit more than he lets it in the air. He can get wild, and if he starts walking runners on, it could create a big inning, and maybe the Yankees do surprise people, but usually not a super offensive upside spot. So I'll be more cherry picking than attacking bats here.
Fair enough. And Alex, I'm just on that similar vein here with Rich Hill and seeing how it may be more of a performance that we're not used to, but a strong one, not allowing as many hits, pitching more for strikeouts than to contact. Last time out, if people may think that could be a theme, but as Gundacker just laid out, that's not really who he is. And maybe that traps people into playing Rich Hill tonight.
Yeah, Rich Hill, he's a little bit of an enigma at this point to me because his numbers look to have gone down a lot since previous years. Although last year he had a really rough year for Minnesota. This year he's kind of bounced back a good amount with a 25% K rate. Still a lot lower than we're used to. But the nice thing is these days Rich Hill isn't getting pulled for blisters or anything like that. But 25% K rate is decent. I'm kind of wondering, like, I know Tampa has a history of producing some big talent arms, and I'm kind of wondering back to this pitching substance thing, if maybe Rich Hill is someone that requires a ton of spin because he has no velocity to get it done. Maybe that could explain why in Minnesota he just wasn't very good at getting strikeouts and why he's bounced back in Tampa. So the matchup's really tough versus the Yankees, but I don't think I'm going to rule him out as a possible contrarian option.
Yeah, just looking at the projected runs for the Yankees on the lineup builder, we have 4.5, which just from talking with you guys and learning from you guys, right, that number 4, kind of looking to go over that. So clearly the Yankees are going to be an appealing stack. Even looking at the stack tool that we have, they're kind of right there in the middle. And we've talked about just individually, and now as you mentioned, Gundacker, the lineup there with the Rays out. Is this even worth a contrarian play of a stack that deep on the stack percentage that we have on the stack tool?
Are you talking about the Rays?
Yeah, because the Yankees, I think, are there. And I think we've seen arguments, you guys have made them, about how they can get over Hill. And just even though it may be a lower scoring game at the Trop, you still have the Yankees with the higher projected run total. So the Rays, I think, would be either people would stay away from entirely, or maybe they would look at it as a contrarian stack tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it should definitely project contrarian. I would say if a fire gets started, yesterday Garrett Cole went 8 innings, handed the ball over to Chapman. Chapman, I think that was his 4th and 5th appearance. So the bullpen's pretty rested, and the Yankees bullpen up until I think they still might have the league lowest ERA. They got some solid arms. So if Aaron Boone has to put out a fire, I think they have the pieces to do it. I don't think I would land on a full Rays stack, and the Rays with Cash as the skipper, they're also a team that switches players a lot throughout games. They'll play the platoon. For instance, Mike Verso, if the Yankees bring in like Lucas Licky or one of the lefties out of the bullpen, you might see Mike Verso come into the lineup over one of these other arms. So it's kind of hard to trust the Rays to get 4 at-bats each, and then also the matchup could get tougher even if they do get the tie-on based on what's coming out of the bullpen. Also, a fun note, just kind of keep an eye on the Yankees. The Yankees had 7 staff members test positive for COVID, and they were doing 3 tests a day yesterday. So you might get a weird lineup with potential more results coming.
Yeah, I wonder, and I know we're a little out on that, but I wonder how late we're going to get that lineup based on that information, right? I mean, this thing could push to the latest possible.
It was mainly it affected coaches, but I think there was concern that Glaber had been exposed. But like he played. Actually, I see him listed as there's an O next to him, so Glaber Torres might be the casualty there, and then you might see like a Tyler Wade or somebody like that draw the start instead.
Is that enough? And I guess Alex, just looking at we know from the contrarian play of the Rays to kind of just the comfort knowing that there's still going to be some risk with this stack in the Yankees. Is that enough to fade or just stay away from this stack, knowing that information, and even if it's just the one casualty?
Well, we'll have the information and plenty of time to react to whatever lineup that they come up with. But this is a really tough park, and a matchup versus Rich Hill, who I mean, I don't think that's going to really add much to their potential here. So I do see the Yankees as being like significantly overpriced today, especially on DraftKings. So I'm thinking maybe this last game we talked about, Oakland at Boston, might be better if you're trying to fade Coors.
Fair enough. As mentioned, our show today brought to you by Jock Market. We'll tell you all about that. Reminder about Awesemo Plus. You want to make sure, especially with shows like today where you can use our free tool, the MLB player rankings, but really more about signing up, access to everything that you can get with Awesemo Plus, and especially with MLB DFS. Now we have it for everything across the board, $29.95, which is easy and cheap. You can get the Awesemo Plus Platinum for 25% off. Just use our code Gold Rush. That's promo code Gold Rush. We have everything available that you could possibly need, including insight from guys like this right here. And then on top of that, everything that you can pull together from the stack tools to the ownership percentages. So you want to make sure that you are following along with the tools available to you. Awesemo Plus, awesemo.com. Again, you can follow us on Twitter at Awesemo MLB. For the guys, it's easy, at Gundacker, at Awesemo DFS for Alex Awesemo, and then at Shander Show for me. All right, so as we hit the third, kind of halfway through here, looking in Houston and factoring in ballpark as well, Texas coming to town, so in-state, not a big trip, right? But if you just start with pitching, and then we'll get to the stacks, because Houston is right up there near the top as far as stacks are concerned. You've got an interesting dynamic here, right, where one guy in Foltynewicz is way down there, and then the other guy in Christian Javier, top price pitcher, DraftKings, you look at it at 10,000. So, Alex, let's look at just approaching this pitching matchup, knowing that you've got two different, at least on the spectrum of cost, two different pitchers and performance as well.
Definitely. I mean, the Houston is just a really tough team to get strikeouts first. So Mike Foltynewicz hasn't been great these past couple seasons. So this is the guy I'm probably going to cross off the list because of the lack of strikeout potential. Christian Javier on the other side. The matchup versus Texas is solid. They're just a rebuilding team that also has a lot of strikeouts. So pretty much exactly what you're looking for. Javier has a 30% K rate this year, so he doesn't have the greatest control with 3.5 walks per 9 innings, but this is a great spot. So I think that it makes sense to roster him. It's just a question, like, is it worth fading all the expensive bats?
Got it. Okay, so again, when using the metrics and your key numbers that you're looking at, Gundacker, especially with a guy like Javier, knowing that it's not about cost for the top price guy, right? How do we approach this specific matchup, clearing the other guy, pretty much redlining Folty Nevich out of this?
Yeah, I'm with Alex. No Folty for me. And like I said, for me in these shorter slates, value is subjective at the pitcher spot based on what we have. If Cristian Javier, if you look at him, there's a range of outcomes that he's the highest scoring pitcher, and I do believe there is, then I have to play him. And those are all plenty, whether or not he gets 20 or 35, if he's the highest scoring pitcher at 20, you're probably going to want him. With that said, I do think there is a big drop off in his strikeout numbers from righties to lefties. So I'd be interested to see how many lefties the Rangers do throw out. I'm not going to overreact to that because the Rangers lefties still boast high strikeout totals, and there's just no pivots to Javier. But I do have back in my mind concerns about potential lefties playing spoiler. But yeah, he'll probably be my top sought after pitcher at the end of the day. 12.5% swing and strike rate. ERA looks a little bit better than his SIERA and xFIP, but in the context of this slate, it's not like it's really, really bad. I talked about us axing out Mike Folty Nevich, have a home run prediction model, the bomb detector, and Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker have the 2 highest ratings out of the whole slate for me today. So I'm definitely looking at some of these Astros bats, and we'll be full stacking Astros as well. And they definitely could be a good pivot to Coors. I don't know if I'm gonna. Yeah, it would be a good pivot to Coors. Definitely more than I say Coors, but the pivot to the Reds. I think the Rockies are kind of looked down upon. So it's Astros and Reds are neck and neck for me as which one's going to end up being my favorite.
Fair enough. And I'm just curious, and also I see a couple of folks on the stream who are new to MLB DFS from the NBA world. So maybe this helps more from a broader standpoint, but we are only dealing with a 6-game slate tonight. So not only does ownership play a lesser role on a larger slate, but also tonight when you're kind of forced to spend money maybe in areas that there's no secret out, right? With Javier at least. So does ownership even play a role tonight to where there might be a number that would take away even a guy like Javier in your lineups?
So Javier is a different example because I don't think like his metrics are as bad, but there's a couple names that like every 5 days, like Nick Pivetta and Luke Weaver, those names always like land on these awkward 6-game slates, and they always end up being overowned, and I happily avoid those. So like in cases like that, yeah. But Cristian Javier, like I think when you put him on the board here, he's probably got the best chance of being the top scoring pitcher more often than not. So I don't think this is a great example of that game theory, but that there's definitely game theory and leverage to be had in baseball. And Alex might be able to chime in a little bit harder. Like baseball might also be the easiest sport to leverage because usually, 50 to 70% ownership guys, mathematically in baseball, they're not going to pan out to be the number one play. And this is more so for the hitters than the pitchers. And in baseball, if you're coming from basketball where you're scared to fade that 70% owned Westbrook or something like that, like you can probably get away with that when it comes to bats on baseball. But the pitching wise is a little bit different.
Alex, I'm sorry. Is that something similar that you would adhere to, especially when you're talking about the shorter slates? Because I know ownership is a metric that you use, may not be the one or even a top leading one, but just as far as how it's factoring in, especially on this shorter slate.
Yeah, I think ownership's huge in MLB. The big question is if your lineup scores a lot of points, what is the likelihood you're going to be on top? Because if you have a lot of the same guys as everyone else, you need to hit every single play. And in MLB, that's very unlikely because there's like so much variance in every single player. So that does create a lot of opportunities to take guys in spots that aren't as good as other guys. And just mathematically, you know that a certain percentage of the time they're going to outscore the chalk. And I think we're going to see that tonight.
So the Houston stack and Gundacker, you mentioned that right from the start here, brother, about just how, you know, you're looking at them versus the pivot to Cincinnati and staying away from Colorado, but clearly Coors Field. Outside of that, just knowing that Cincinnati is there, and I'm curious, you guys, just both of you looking at the stack with Houston, the expectations, how high they are on Alex's stack tool to the projective models that you have as well, Gundacker. Like, why else would somebody stay, if maybe at all, would somebody stay away from Houston tonight, looking at just everything that it looks like on the surface, kind of ushering you and moving you in the direction of stacking them?
For Houston, I don't really have a reason to get away from. I do think, like, if you look at the Awesemo top stacks tool, the Reds have an ownership share at 30% from what the last update I've seen, and Houston's at 12%. So if we both think Houston and the Cincinnati are really good plays, and Houston's less than half the ownership of the Cincy side, that would make me want a little bit more Houston. But as far as like just putting Houston against the rest of the slate, there's not a reason to be off of Houston. The only thing that would really push me away from stacks when I didn't want to be is if I thought they were egregiously owned and I couldn't get the leverage that I maybe wanted to finish first place. But I'm not getting that with Houston. Maybe Cincinnati's going to end up really, really high, but Houston is right now sitting at 12%. I'll take that all day.
Yeah, I mean, projected runs 5.4 on the lineup builder, Alex, seems like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're in a great spot. It does look like the heart of the order is pretty high owned today. The top four guys all above 10%. So it could be a little bit tricky to create a lineup that's differentiated here. So I'm kind of lukewarm on them, I guess. I do feel like you might be better off going a little bit farther down the list to maybe Oakland. Boston, I'd say that's my favorite game.
Well, okay, and just before we start hitting the later half of this slate here, just on Texas alone, and again, this is going to be similar to trying to find, maybe it is a contrarian, but you got just over four projected runs for this team. The ownership is not going to be nearly as high, we know, as Houston. So I don't know, is this a sneak play, or is this a full-on contrarian play, or is this something, Alex, that you just, hey, you want to stay away, and maybe does factor in what we're about to hit, right, with Coors and even the game before that you mentioned with the the A's and the Red Sox?
Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by Texas. I mean, they have a team total of 4.1, which is not horrible. And the ownership's super low at around 2% on both sites. And I mean, in baseball, pretty much any stack has the same upside of being a slate winner. So I don't think we should be overly worried about Christian Javier, certainly. He's kind of a newer face, a lot of talent, but not a proven ace by any means. So I think it could pay off big to gamble on one of these teams just a little bit farther down the list, like Texas.
What do you think, man? You're gonna take a shot on Texas too, or are they stay away from you?
So no, I agree. And we talk about playing ownerships on small slates. If Christian Javier is going to be high his own, like I'm going to be in on Javier. But I talked about his splits against lefties, definitely way more susceptible to damage than his splits versus righties. Some of the better Rangers bats are lefty. Joey Gallo, Nate Lowe, Willie Calhoun. They could take advantage. He has a 1.38 to a 208 home run per nine between this year and last year to lefties, and the xFIP is nearly 5 to both sides or on both seasons. So there is certainly a range of outcome. You pop the roof open in Minute Maid, get some of the Texas breeze going. Yeah, leverage, and that's not to say I won't have Javier as well. I leverage against my own ownership if I have to. So I don't disagree with that take.
Yeah, I see the total still around 8.5, right? Going to Odd Shopper, of course, where we can get the most up-to-date odds on everything across the board for you, from run lines, money lines, totals, and more. So even the projection looks like you're going to get some offense involved in that, and if it's Minute Maid, right, the park itself, to be able to take advantage of it, and really just getting past that first maybe round or two of at bats, or maybe just getting to them early. But yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on Texas, because just looking at where they are from a run projection standpoint, just over 4, and then also combining that with the stack tools, you see them kind of at the bottom tier. But it looks like it's overall, and especially since you guys agree on this thing, so who am I to throw a wedge in it, that it's a good play, even though they're lower on the board. So just wanted to look at that. Now we have the big one, of course. Cincinnati's in Colorado, so we'll hit Coors Field and everything that comes from it, from the low-cost pitchers to the at least projected high-owned stacks, and everything here on Awesemo. This program, the MLB Deeper Dive, brought to you by Jock Market, and this is fantastic. If you don't know already, it's fantasy sports turned into a stock market where you can just buy and sell shares of players, real time, real money, and it's all about the immediate payout, guaranteed for all shares, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA. So for what we're doing, forget the player props with the books. This is where you want to be. Trust me, as somebody who gets crushed all the time on lost value, if you get in too late with the books and the props, Jock Market is the way to go. You can use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of all of your favorite players. You buy, sell, you can hold. It's just like the market. Download the app, get going today. Use our exclusive Awesemo.com promo. Our code is Awesemo20, the number 20. So AWESEMO, the number 20. That's a $20 bonus. Sign up today. Use it again. Awesemo, the number 20, for a $20 bonus. It's the future of prop bets. And as soon as it comes here to PA, I'm going to be all over it. I can promise you that. It's amazing just to see this. And it's really crazy, because the books get you all the time on lost value, but something like Jock Market, for anybody who plays individual player props, I don't know why, if you have access to this, you're not doing it. I'm sure both of you guys well aware of the values versus waiting on the sports books, right? All right. Cincinnati, Colorado. We're in Coors Field here, and this is what we've been waiting for. Let's get the pitchers out of the way. 2 super low-cost pitchers here, as expected. You've got Luis Castillo's been bumped up. You've got Chichi Gonzalez on the other end of it, charged with slowing down the top stack on the entire board here. So let's start, Alex, as far as the pitching matchup. Is it even worth it as far as a P2 is concerned, looking at either Castillo or Gonzalez?
Yeah, I mean, I see Castillo is picking up a surprising amount of ownership here. So I'll start with Gonzalez. Chichi Gonzalez has been around the league for a few years. I don't think I've ever rostered him in fantasy. He just doesn't strike guys out. So being in Coors for half the games is not going to help with that at all. 12% strikeout rate so far this year. Castillo, he's really had his performance drop off a ton this year. And it started off, I think his first start, he got 0 strikeouts or something. So he got off to a really rough start. But his swinging strike rate is crashed this year too, down from 15% to 10% this year. So the fact that his strikeouts have dropped from 31% to 17%, although that's a ridiculous amount, there is reason to believe that it's not just bad luck. Velocity's dropped at a mile an hour as well. And it will be harder to strike out guys at Coors. So I'm trying to talk myself off playing Castillo because he's really popular and really cheap. Gundacker, what are you doing with Castillo here?
I mean, if a pitcher, we're looking at almost 40%, maybe over 40% projection here. 40% owned pitcher in Coors, and it's not even like he's like Trevor Bauer went out there dominating Coors. Luis Castillo has not had a fantastic year, especially on the fantasy side. Maybe you look at him as a Coors bat and you hope for like a home run point, like 14. And the Rockies definitely are a little bit lackluster this season and haven't been world shakers at home, even in the Coors elements. But I mean, that seems like an ownership that I'd probably pry away from. If that's how I get different on this slate, is to not play the chalk Coors pitcher, that might be the door I walk through, because that's wild. That's a lot to ask for. So yeah, I could probably stay away from that. And yeah, I'm not playing Chichi Gonzalez.
Right. Okay. So moving again, we'll redline Gonzalez, right, for the purposes of this conversation. I don't get it with Castillo, and I'm curious, guys, just looking at it, he's been bumped up. He was supposed to start tomorrow, and instead he's starting tonight because of Miley throwing over 110 pitches, right? So wouldn't that be more of a deterrent to stay away from a guy in Coors Field? What am I missing that is probably more obvious to you two that's not to me about why we should stay away? Again, I just looked at that factor as something to just add on to what you guys are both saying about Castillo. It just seems like the public seems to be going in the opposite direction.
So pitchers usually only need 5 days between starts, and his last start was the 8th, so it would still meet the 5-day threshold. Right. So I don't think that's as much of a factor today. If it was going from like 4-day or 5-day to 4-day or something like that, maybe I'd be a little bit more scared of that. But I don't think that's going to play a massive part in the outcome, at least.
6,200 I see on Draftkings, and I know Alex was looking for us to talk him out of it, but it's not a terrible P2 option if you can deal with the ownership, right? That's me being the devil on the other side of your shoulder. Sorry.
I mean, Colorado has like a dreadful team this year. Like they have like 2 good batters, but I mean they do play in Coors Field, and the weather has really turned around. It's going to be around 70 degrees at first pitch tonight. So this is a lot of different conditions than Coors Field. I think the last game there on the slate was a couple days ago. I can't remember. Anyway, it was like 50 degrees. So the conditions are just getting better and better in Coors. But Castillo's underpriced. So that's the conundrum. I do feel like a pitcher in the last game is just like a slam pivot from Castillo, though.
I think I'm on the hunt with that one, Alex.
Yeah. I still see the total. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, brother.
No, I was saying the foreshadow to the last game. I'm feeling that.
All right, so that lineup is locked in, at least for Cincinnati. I still see this total here, 11 now, 11.5 if you wanted to go under. Again, Odd Shopper is where we go for everything beyond just DFS. You're placing a wager. It doesn't matter if it's Jock Market or if it's on a sports book. You want to make sure that you're at oddshopper.awesemo.com. It's where we use everything here. Look, I'd be inclined just to take the over just because of the scenario here in the ballpark at home for Colorado, struggling going up against 2 guys in Castillo and Gonzalez that I don't know if you can trust from a run standpoint. But that then, begs the question about just how strong of a play. And, we referenced this earlier when Gundacker was explaining the difference between Houston, Cincinnati versus ownership, but it's over double the stack percentage that you're going to get back on Alex's stack tool here for Cincinnati than Houston and Colorado. In fact, if you added Houston and Colorado up at 10-3 and 10-2, you still wouldn't get where Cincinnati is at 23. So ownership aside, is this a must play in at least one or a couple of your lineups tonight? Seems like it.
Well, yeah, I think, okay, I'm starting off hedging already, but this is the best spot we've seen for bats this entire year. Cincinnati is not like a amazing roster, but their lineup today has a good amount of pop with the 2 through 5 hitters. The first guy, Senzel, he has some stolen base upside. They do have a few dead spots in the lineup, starting 6 through 8, but still the weather conditions and the matchup is just adding up to a perfect situation. And the prices aren't high on these guys either. So it's like you're going to make your lineup look really sick if you stack up Cincinnati, but everyone else is going to be doing the same thing. Nick Senzel has 50% projected ownership on DraftKings. Like, I like him, but I don't know if I like him 50%, So I feel like this is a big dilemma because they are in such a good spot, but it's baseball. And there's a saying, that's baseball for a reason. So I don't hate betting against them.
All right. Now, as far as Cincinnati is concerned, right, it's something, Anthony, you as well, right? We talked about Houston versus Cincinnati. I mean, how did we play Cincy tonight?
So if you want to play Cincy and you want to fill even with the field, you're going to have to dedicate a decent chunk of your lineups to do so. Yeah. So I usually hate having to do that. But at the same time, if you're 5 stacking, you're probably going to have similar lineups to the rest. That's why I'm kind of excited if Castillo is that type of ownership today. Like, I feel like I could rather leverage that than the hitters today. So if that's going to spot me some leverage score by fading Castillo for the rookie in the later game, I'll probably do that, and then I'll just eat the Reds talk, because you got to imagine like the Reds being the highest owned stack and then Castillo being the highest owned projected pitcher. If the common denominator is the pitcher, I could still have the red stack and stay away from the pitcher. And if my pitcher does better than Castillo, then my red stack is better than that red stack. So I usually look for excuses to stay away from Coors, like I said earlier. But the Reds are just they're projecting extremely well for me, and that top half of the lineup is so much fun in their home park, and they bring the bats at home. And I think in Coors it's going to be more of the same with a little bit more guaranteed at bats with it's Chichi Gonzalez. Like I gotta be invested in that.
And look, I get it with Chichi, and clearly there's going to be an opportunity to take full advantage of that. But we still have a Rockies team with a projected run total of 5.5. You know that they're going to be less owned, at least overall, than what Cincinnati is. And as far as just the return on the stack percentage with Alex and your tool you have here on Awesemo.com, they're right there at the top, number 3. So is this just a matter of Cincinnati is such a better option that people are just going to flock there and maybe miss an opportunity to play the Rockies lineups?
Yeah, I don't know if the Rockies would be my first choice to pivot, but yes, I think they're a decent option. I mean, a lineup that's not very good, but as you were talking about, the conditions are really good. And the fact is, so far, Castillo has underperformed, and there's reason to believe he's taking a step backwards. So I don't hate the matchup. So I think the Rockies are pretty valid as far as the DFS option tonight.
How do they match up with what you're looking at as far as your projections, Gundacker, and knowing that, as we've mentioned, 2 other options to stack heavy from right there at the top, right, with Cincinnati, and then also that Houston game earlier?
Yeah, so I think they'll be low on just because the pitcher's high on. A lot of people set their opto just to not have bats against their pitcher. The strikeouts are in that lineup. Like, I understand why somebody would want to pitch against this lineup. It's just like, but if I look at what Castillo's been doing this year, he's not been good, much less great against other average to below average teams. So I've a lot of skepticism, especially handcuffed to that type of ownership. When it comes to potential plays on the Rockies, there's a lot of cheapos. I think you're going to see a lot of Connor Joe. He's 2K. He's got one of the more fun names in baseball. Bare bones 2K on DraftKings. And then just price-wise, like Trevor Story and Ryan McMahon are going to be your highest price on DraftKings. On Fanduel, this is a normal team price-wise. Trevor Story 36, McMahon 33, Blackman 35. Like, these are all very obtainable, get their pricing, and it might even be like low enough to have just a straight up full-on core stack. And you said the Rockies are a team with one of the higher run totals at 5+, and they're not they're not allergic to scoring runs here, especially this top half. So I don't have to do much. I think we looked at the stack tool earlier, and they were about the same ownership as the Astros. I do prefer the Astros more. But yeah, I'm not going to not stack Coors on a 6-game slate, and that includes the home team as well.
No, and you're dead on as far as the comparison and the numbers, how they play out with Houston and Colorado. So even right down to the ownership. I'm just curious, before we hit the Awesemo Hall of Fame, we've got 2 more games to get to, including Trevor Rogers starting tonight. But is there, like, what's the likelihood that this duds out? And I know that it's not high, and the metrics from a DFS to a betting standpoint are going to tell you that they're going to be runs scored tonight in Coors. But is there any concern at all that so much weight is on the emphasis of this being a high-scoring game? It's going to get out of hand, most likely for Colorado, that we look at a 4-2 game when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I mean, like, the easiest way to think of this is you look at all the projections for batters. There's more than a 50% chance that each one individually will score less than their projection. So even the best projected guy, Jesse Winker, he has a projection of 12.5 Draftkings points. That means more than half the time he's going to score less than 12.5. That might not be enough to win your GPP. And that doesn't apply to the whole team, like, when you consider them all, because like, there probably will be some that score above their projection, right? So it's not like the easiest thing to fade, but I do feel like each one of these guys is more likely to fail than to succeed individually. Fair
enough. I saw it again, by the way, as we let you know one more time about the Awesemo Hall of Fame, where I sign up, get in the tournament. The next day, I look at just how bad I get my ass torched in the standings, and right there at the top, and now I'm going to look for it. Right there at the top, it's just all of the Awesemo profile picks. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a takeover now. Everybody's doing it. You want to do it as well. You can tweet us at Awesemo HOF, but most importantly, what you want to do first and foremost is download the Awesemo profile pick from awesemo.com/avatar. Place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants. This shouldn't be difficult because I see it all the time, especially when I'm on the lower end of these and I hit the button to go shoot up right to the top. Now I'm looking for it, like I'm sure a lot of you are as well, and you'll win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And you can see, as we continue to tell you each and every show here, run through all of these amazing winners. It's happening. And if you're out there and you're finishing 2nd or 5th or 10th, you're seeing, I'm sure you're frustrated knowing that was just a quick little, just one little tinker of the lineup maybe at the top, but you see, you and everybody else, you're going up against Awesemo folks, Awesemo subscribers. So you want to make sure that you're also subscribed to Awesemo Plus, $29.95 a week, and you're totally intact with everything going on. All right, final 2 games here on the schedule, gentlemen, and we still have now Trevor Rogers getting the nod, Miami in Arizona. And Alex, let's start there with Rogers himself. You know, clearly at 9,300 on DraftKings, going to be a big option, especially now getting that start delayed that night. So how do you even approach, knowing that we've already talked about another high-priced pitcher? Where is Rogers now on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, Trevor Rogers has been lights out to start the year, 33% K rate. And he's barely allowed any runs as well. Now, Arizona's lineup, although they're not expected to have a good lineup today, they also are going to be harder to strike out than your typical MLB team. So that does mitigate a little bit of interest in Rogers, but I still think he's in a great spot. And between him and Kristen Javier, I think Rogers has a tougher matchup in a tougher park, but he's the better pitcher. So overall, maybe close to a wash.
Yeah, and just looking at pricing, knowing, of course, that you're talking about 2 guys that are high end, it's still a shorter, right, slate here tonight. So just looking at paying, if it's 9,300, 10,000 for your P1, P2, or P2 P2, P1, depending on the order, right? That doesn't seem like it would be too overpriced, Gundacker. Is that a fair assessment, knowing that it's only a 6-game slate, especially a couple of these stacks that we talked about that were cheaper that you could still get a good return on?
I mean, if we isolate just his talent, yeah, he definitely has a range of outcomes to where he's going to bust over 20 and likely contend to be a top scoring pitcher. I would say I'm extremely nervous about Trevor Rogers today. Alex mentioned D-backs don't have a high strikeout profile against lefties. And also, according to the D-backs website, the roof's going to be open. And this would be probably the hottest game of the season for any game thus far, if that stands to be true. Sometimes it gets too hot. They change their mind before the game and things change up. But right now, it could be almost 100 degrees out there in the desert. And that's going to be a much different situation than we've seen Trevor pitch to this season. A lot of climate controlled stuff. And then, years back, this would be my ultra pivot to Coors, humidor, kind of neutralizing the offensive upside a little bit. But I'm definitely very, very scared. I think Trevor Rogers, in terms of my personal ownership to him, will be something I meditate on and revisit 100 times between now and lock it. And I think whatever the D-backs lineup ends up putting out is going to be the big weight for me, because the projected lineup I'm looking at right now, I just got 3 guys well over a 20% K rate against the lefties. And even if the D-backs don't put up a bunch of runs, I do think that the lack of strikeout potential or the lower strikeout potential might scare me away a little bit. So the D-backs is the lineup I'm probably most on pins and needles for right now, because I do want to play Rogers, but there's a lot going against him that we normally don't see.
Yeah, I'm just seeing at least on Fanduel, the projected ownership just at 8%. That's the same as Merrill Kelly right now, who comes off that start against the Mets. And it was that one really bad inning, but pretty decent overall outside of that, knowing that he still takes the L. And I wonder at 7,200, looking at him on Fanduel, 7,900 on Draftkings, if this may be a worthy quasi-contrarian P2 play.
Merrill Kelly?
Yes, sir.
So the Marlins projected lineup does have Duvall, Anderson, Isan Diaz, Brinson, Sandy Leon, and Rogers. All those guys have almost a 30+% collective strikeout rate against righties. With that said, Merrill Kelly has been more of a contact pitcher in 38 innings and so far, a sub 8% swing and strike rate in the Sierra, and xFIP knocking on the door of 5. So you put that, that's less talent in the same potential environment. So I'm less enthralled by playing Merrill Kelly in terms of his fantasy upside. So I don't know if I'm going to redline him just yet, but it definitely feels like he could be knocking on the door of joining Chichi Gonzalez and Folty Nevich.
Oh man, that's not the company you want to be in. I know we only have a couple of minutes left here, but if we're adding more guys on the red line list, that's not great by any means for Kelly. So maybe that's the indication right there. Just the thought of redlining him to stay away. Now, as far as the lineups are concerned, I know we still have, then we'll get to especially Logan Gilbert tonight up against Zach Plesac at the end. But just looking at these respective lineups with the Marlins and D-backs, you do have both projected over 4. And you just, Gundacker, mentioned as far as the strikeout percentage and maybe some holes with Miami. But, Alex, I'm just curious, based on your stack tool percentage and based on just how you see Miami looking at, on the surface at least, the better option for the stack.
Yeah, Miami has the easier matchup versus Merrill Kelly. Their lineup could be totally trash today, to be honest. But as Gundacker was saying, with the roof open, maybe it doesn't matter. It's almost as good as Coors. So I think they're worth checking out today. I think Miami, compared to the names you're going to be rostering, might have a lot more potential than you think.
Now, as far as the flip side there with Arizona, is there anything we can mine here, Gundacker, just kind of wrapping up this game before we get to the final one?
As far as bats, I think Carson Kelly would be kind of, I want to say untouchable. People are not going to get to a 5K catcher over potentially Tucker Barnhart and Coors for a little cheaper. And Kelly's been really, really good against lefties. If LeCastro leads off, he doesn't hit for a great average, but good OBP, fastest runner in baseball. And if you are in the batter's box with the fastest guy in baseball on first base, you're likely going to get more mistake pitches than if not.
Fair enough. Final game on the slate here. Logan Gilbert, one of two guys, right, making his MLB debut. This has to be, from both a pitch and stack standpoint, the key factor in this game, right? So let's just start here. And how does the Logan Gilbert debut impact everything, Alex, across the board, from pitching and knowing that Plesac on the other side, a pretty owned option, to a stack as well going up against Gilbert?
Yeah, so here's the scoop I found on Gilbert is that the Mariners kept him and Jared Kelenic in the minors until today to get 1 year more control. So it has nothing to do with their talent level. And Logan Gilbert's stats in the minor leagues were pretty good. He had like a 5-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. So he has pretty good control and pretty good strikeout stuff. Cleveland is a little bit of a tough team to strike out, but I mean, Gilbert's only 4K, so it's not like you're paying very much for him. So I think he's a great option that I'm hoping people don't realize he's any good because he's only 4K.
Yeah, especially based on that, right, where you find out, it's all about the business element to it. Are you running with Gilbert tonight, Gundacker? 4K?
Yeah, earlier me and Alex had that laugh about the pivot to Castillo. It's Logan Gilbert. Logan Gilbert's 4K on DraftKings. That's the min price for a pitcher. I definitely think like the Indians do strike out a lot less, but they're also not great. They've been no hit twice in the last month. Daniel Kramer is the beat writer for the Mariners. He said that they expect Gilbert to have a leash of 80, 85 pitches at 4K. That's enough for me to jam him at the SP2 spot. As far as pitch selection, he's going to throw a fastball, sits in mid-90s, can get up to 97. He has a plus slider, a plus changeup, but an average curveball. So 4 pitches in his pitch selection, and so far as a pro in the minors has a K per night at almost 11. So another plus from a low strikeout team or a plus going against a low strikeout team. There's not a lot of tape on him. He hasn't had, we haven't had minor league baseball in a year or so. So it's not like the Indians can fall back and maybe bring out that iPad and see what to expect. So they're going to be filling him out. I'm very interested in seeing him. Obviously, the hype's on Jared Kelenic as the big bat for the Mariners. He was part of the dump off for Edwin Diaz, Robbie Cano. He's touted to be a top 5 prospect in all of baseball, and he's bare bones min on DraftKings as well. So I definitely think the keys to a full-on slot of Reds sit right there in Kelenic and Logan Gilbert as making that stack really, really easy to get to, and even some of the other upside stacks I like as well, like the Astros.
Well, what about Plesac, right? And I see the price here, 8,300 on DraftKings. The guy hasn't given up an earned run in his last 2 starts. It's pricey. You're also going up against the unknown. I understand that as far as how appealing Logan Gilbert can be, but is there any love at all for Plesac?
Yes, Plesac 8,300. One of the guys that can drop 20 plus DKP. The Mariners still come out with a high K rate overall. I do think that the Mariners are starting to transform slowly into that prospect team. Mitch Haniger is one of the league leaders in homers, and you're starting to see guys like Seager activate. And if Kelenic can start hot, I think he's probably going to bat between 6th and 8th, maybe. Projected lineup had him 9th. I don't know that they're going to put him in the 9th spot, but we'll see. I do think the Mariners will start becoming better than the public perception. But on a 6-game slate, Plesac is a chip in a chair to be a 20 plus DKP, and that's kind of the mark for me. If I think you can drop me 20 plus, I'll put you in the mix, and Plesac will be there for me.
Any final thoughts on Plesac, Alex?
I think he's fine. He's probably a better pitcher than a fantasy pitcher. Only a 19% K rate so far this year. So not a guy you're expecting to get a ton of strikeouts, although he was at 28% last year. the matchup is great. And Seattle, a team that plays a good park and isn't, as Gundacker was saying, is young, not that good yet. So I think he's fine, but I'm not going to go out of my way to get please sack tonight.
All right, so it looks like we only redlined 2 pitchers, right, on this short 6-game slate. I know that Kelly, we were kind of going back and forth on, and follow Gundacker on Twitter at Gundacker in case he meditates and comes to a conclusion anytime soon. And that's what I would go for too. He is going to be the guiding light on whether or not Kelly gets redlined. But other than that, I think, we've had a pretty good deep dive, if you will, into this 6-game slate. And hopefully everybody got enough information out there, and from fading to strong plays, stacks to pitchers. And I think we got it all in, guys.
Definitely. Should be a good one.
Any final thoughts? I saw this as far as on the stream to stay away from a stack. Is there any final thought, one stack at all, that just to remind anybody who just popped in, who hasn't subscribed, who hasn't liked, who hasn't hit the notification bell, so you came in late, but we'll throw you a bone here really quick at the end as far as the ultimate fade stack tonight. Even though it's a 6-game slate, even though you have a lot of options as far as cheaper options on that shorter slate, was there one that we just redlined from a stack standpoint?
I don't think there's necessarily one you have to fade, but the one thing I'd be concerned about is if you do stack up the Reds, they're kind of your honeypot stack today, and it might be kind of hard to get different enough with the rest of your lineup. So I feel like the ownership there is going to be a big factor.
Fair enough. All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching. At Gundacker, at Awesemo DFS, at Shander Show. Thanks to Tyler for making it another fantastic show producing. Thanks to you out there for watching. We'll see you later. Good luck.